area, just a little north of Tel Aviv where we are. One hit a parking lot where a bus was set on fire. We could see that a structure was on fire, and we've got reports that a house was hit. No one was home at the time. No injuries. This all comes at a time when President Trump abruptly left that G7 summit in Canada and posted an ominous message to Truth Social, concluding with the line, everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. When pressed in the gaggle aboard Air Force One, he clarified that it's always possible something could happen.
Many people are praying for the nation of Israel amid its war with Iran. Talking about this on Washington Watch, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that we should also be praying for the Iranian people.
We should pray that the Iranian people are able to overthrow this regime in a way that delivers them a good outcome, that it doesn't just end up in the hands of the IRGC thugs, or it doesn't end up in the hands of someone who's even worse.
Former vice presidential candidate Minnesota Governor Tim Walz says by siding with Israel, the U.S. has lost the moral authority to help bring the conflict to an end. But it's who he thinks does have that moral permission that's turning heads.
Tim Walz is blaming Israel for the ongoing conflict between that country and Iran. Moreover, he says the U.S. has lost the ethical standing to help bring the crisis to an end. Who does he think should be leading the peace process?
Who is the voice in the world that can negotiate some type of agreement in this? Who holds the moral authority? I mean, consistently over and over again, we're going to have to face the reality. It might be the Chinese.
That's right. The country that's stealing U.S. tech, spying on military bases, supporting unrest on American campuses, and whose number one priority is bringing the U.S. to its knees, is the beacon of morality in the world. Gary Bauer of American Values is so unimpressed with the man who would have been the intellectual leader of a Harris-Walz administration.
Tim Walz it just seems to be intent every day to prove that he is a complete nincompoop.
Bauer says Walz has a long history as a friend of communist China.
How many Americans have made 20 trips to communist China? Why are there Chinese influence operations operating in Minnesota? And there are multiple photographs of him posing with people that are involved with those influence operations.
He says Walz is unknowingly or knowingly doing the bidding of Chairman Xi.
I think the guy is either naive or what Stalin used to call a useful idiot. That is, somebody in the West that is just plain dumb.
I'm Steve Chordall.
President Trump agreeing to a new trade deal with the UK before leaving the G7 summit. Lydia Hu reports.
President Trump departed early from the G7 summit in Canada yesterday to focus on the growing Israel-Iran conflict. But before he left, progress made on trade. President Trump closed the first trade deal, a signed agreement with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Details now come after the country said last month that they had a framework in place. Now we know the agreement gives the U.S. greater access to the British market to sell American beef and ethanol and exempts the UK from a 10% tariff imposed on all countries.
A former senator is set to begin his prison sentence.
Bob Menendez became the first U.S. senator to be convicted as a foreign agent. Menendez was sentenced to 11 years in jail after facing accusations of accepting bribes in exchange for helping the Egyptian government. The New Jersey Democrat consistently claimed he was innocent throughout the process. He resigned from office in August of last year. Andy Kim now holds Menendez's seat. His Senate career began in 2006, and he was the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at the time of his indictment. In Washington, Ryan Schmelz, Fox News.
More news available online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
The American Family Association's mission is to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of our culture. Our goal is to be a leading organization in biblical worldview training for cultural transformation. We stand on the biblical truth that all human beings, including the unborn, are created in the image of God and are endowed by Him with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Thank you for standing with the American Family Association.
Welcome to today's issues. Join us for the next hour as we offer a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's issues. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman this week. It is June 17, 2025. Joining me in the studio, Fred Jackson. Good morning, Fred.
Yeah, it's D-Day.
D-Day.
It's D-Day.
Is it?
For hockey.
For hockey. That is true. Let me introduce the rest of the guests who mean nothing to this conversation. The rest of the hosts. Wesley Wildman, good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm sitting on your left, but I'm not on the left.
You're not, and you're not politically to my left either.
That's what I mean when I'm not. I'm not on the left.
All the young guys,
but I'm sitting on the
here.
left.
You and Walker and my son Tony, they're all to the right of me.
We try to compete
politically.
It's a competition.
That's right.
Far right as we can get.
Yeah. Chris Woodward, geographically, I guess, is to the right of all of us.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
And I'm a big baseball fan.
Okay, we don't care. All right. So explain what you mean by this is D-Day in terms of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Well, as far as the finals and the Stanley Cup hockey finals, we're down to perhaps the very last game of the year.
Yeah.
Because Florida is up 3-2 over the Edmonton Oilers. I'm rooting for Edmonton.
Right. The last Canadian team left in the playoffs.
And I have to say they've been a disappointment. So if Florida Panthers win tonight, this will be their second Stanley Cup championship in a row.
And their third appearance in the finals. They lost in the first one.
Yes, and I think we need to thank the Boston Bruins for giving up Mr. Marchand.
Yeah. So, folks, for most of you who are listening and who do not care one whit about this conversation, Brent Creeley, our producer, is shaking his head. He doesn't care. My team, the Boston Bruins, traded our captain.
Yes.
To a team most Bruins fans despise, the Florida Panthers, and he has had a whale of a playoffs and may very well not only help them win the Stanley Cup, but might win the Conn Smythe Trophy for the most valuable player. It is just a bizarre situation. But I think I told you, Fred, I'm having a hard time deciding who I wanted to have win. I like Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers. I'd like to see them win a cup and return the cup to Canada. And I hate the Panthers, but I love Brad Marchand.
So it's like a quarterback that's really talented on a team getting traded to his rival.
Yes.
And then
leading them to
the playoffs.
Yes.
Okay.
It's been a wild thing. But tonight the game is in Florida.
Yeah.
And this is game 6. If they win, it's over.
I hope that the professional football team in Miami would take notes on how to win a championship. So, Tua, if you're listening to me, please stay healthy.
I'm sure.
And win.
I'm sure all the NFL is listening.
They
to
should
our
be.
program. They should.
This is the show called Today's Issues.
That's right. So, all right, folks. Well, for the 99% of you who are listening who do not care about hockey, thank you for indulging Fred and I.
Yeah.
And now for your College World Series playoffs.
Yes. Do you have something you'd like to share?
Only one thing, since we're talking sports for just a moment, it's worth noting. The pitcher for Arkansas last night, Monday night, threw a no-hitter for the third time ever in the College World Series. Third time in the College World Series. Ever. And so dating back as long as they've had the World Series, top 8 teams in the country, through a playoff, he threw a no-hitter, complete game. You don't see that much
What's
anymore.
his name?
His last name's Wood. I'll have to find his first
Well, anyway, congratulations.
Yeah.
I just thought we'd give him a shout-out. We do have listeners, a lot of listeners in Arkansas.
Yep.
Where is the College World Series being played?
Omaha, Nebraska.
Is it always in Omaha?
Always in Omaha.
Right.
It has been since I've been watching.
Your mom and dad actually drove up there a few years ago?
When Mississippi State was in it.
That's right. In 2021, my dad's like packing up and asking me, can I go, as if I don't have 3 kids in response. Like, I need a little more of a notice, or just don't ask. Because now I'm sitting here looking at the clock at like 10 o'clock at night, and he's packing up to leave the next morning to go, because it was kind of a last-minute thing for them. because they were wanting to see how far they went. They didn't have the time or the money to go for the whole College World Series experience. But when they saw that State was going to make it, they last season, and he asked me to go, and I was like, it's like on a Monday, and I've got like a whole week of plans and responsibilities. And I was like, why did you even ask? Just leave. But yeah, so
made it worse.
But in 2021, they were able to go, and they enjoyed that. And just wanted to mention we're out in the middle of that right now, and the pitcher for Arkansas, Gage Wood, threw a no-hitter.
Yep. To this young man, his team, and his family. I'm sure they're thrilled. So, all right, folks. Just to let you know, at the bottom of the hour, Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, will be here on campus and in studio. We have a couple of legal questions dealing with current issues to pitch Matt's way. Whenever we have an attorney in studio, sometimes it's Jenna Ellis or Abe Hamilton III, we like to kind of pick their brains a little bit. None of us here are lawyers, so when we have the opportunity, we like to.
We all tried, and we didn't make it past the first year. No, just kidding. No, we didn't try. I didn't try. Did anybody else here try to be a lawyer?
No, I always tell the story fairly frequently that when I went to college. This is before I became a Christian. I was a pre-law. My intent was to go to law school. And became a Christian and felt the calling to go into the ministry, so that's where my education led me after my second year at Boston College. But my mom, later on in life, she would brag to people when she would introduce me.
Yeah.
My son's a minister. He gave up his law career for the ministry, and I would say, Ma, that's still the Boston accent. I was never a lawyer. She said, well, you went to law school. I said, no, I didn't go to law school. I was pre-law in undergraduate. She said, oh, same thing. You never win an argument with your mom. So.
No, but you know what? I'm glad to have Matt Staver in studio with us. It's great to have Christians with those that have a biblical worldview in law.
Amen.
Just like we need them in politics, and we need them in government. We need them in education and entertainment. And I'm grateful for Matt Staver and his team and what they do.
Amen. Amen. All right, so that's bottom of the hour, folks. All right, Chris, anything happening in the Middle East?
A few things. So let's begin here. Yesterday, President Trump posted on social media that people in Tehran should evacuate the city immediately. And, of course, that raised a lot of eyebrows. Why in the world should people evacuate? What's going to happen? What does he know? And based on a story that Fred just posted on AFN.net, it appears that the people of Tehran did listen to Donald Trump and took his advice. Tehran empties out after Trump says the city should evacuate immediately. Of course, this all has to do with the war that has broken out between Israel and Iran. For people that maybe are just now getting back to the news, the war really kind of got going last Thursday, our time, late Thursday night, U.S. time, when Israel, which felt it had no other option but to attack Iran based on its nuclear weapons research, bombed various parts of Iran and took out air defense systems. They took out things that they were doing to research nuclear weapons, things like that. Of course, Iran retaliated, and the two nations have been shooting rockets at one another for several days since. Because of this conflict, President Trump was actually at a gathering called the G7 Summit, which he left yesterday to go back to Washington, D.C., to meet with national security leaders and foreign policy advisors over this situation. That was when Trump put it out on Truth Social that, in all caps, evacuate Tehran. And again, it appears that people have taken him on his advice.
Well, Fred, this is obviously a situation that is not going away. It doesn't seem to be calming down. There does not seem to be any hope at this point of any kind of a ceasefire or any kind of a negotiations. In fact, I think Iran, the leaders of Iran have said all along they are going to get a bomb.
Yeah.
They are not giving that up. So I'm not sure what kind of negotiations could happen unless the mullahs who run Iran believe that they might lose power. Instead, what seems to be happening is things are escalating, as Chris mentioned. We have talked about on the show, I think we mentioned yesterday about the tankers That's refuel fighter jets and bombers and whatever air power assets we might want to use. So there's no real telling. Literally, only God knows where this is going.
Yeah, exactly. At one point during the G7 meeting that Chris referenced, Macron, the French leader, said that Trump was returning to Washington overnight to negotiate a ceasefire, and President Trump was somewhat upset about that. He said, "I'm not returning to negotiate a ceasefire." Here's the reality. October 7, 2023 changed the whole mindset of the Israeli leadership.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They have had, I'll call them skirmishes, with Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran for years and years and years. But October 7, 2023, when Hamas massacred more than 1,200 Israeli men, women, and children, it changed the whole mindset. The idea of we're going to fight for a little while, then we'll have a ceasefire, and we'll hope for some peace. And those ceasefires, the year or so of peace always gets broken by the bad guys again. And I think Netanyahu and his cabinet have just decided. They decided for Hamas, we're not going to allow Hamas to regain control in Gaza.
Right.
That's the way it's going to be. And I think they're taking the same approach with Iran now. We're not going to be satisfied with a ceasefire, or, we'll just watch things over the next couple of years to make sure you don't develop. Here's the thing. They believe Iran is on track to develop a nuclear weapon.
Right.
Plain and simple. They are not going to allow Iran to do that, and they are going to do whatever is possible. Just watching an analysis from an ex-CIA person. In this battle right now, Israel owns the skies.
Right.
That plain and simple. They did some more missions into Iran overnight again. There's been a few missiles. The reality is Iran is running out of missiles.
Yeah.
They've already fired off hundreds of these things. There's been damage outside of Tel Aviv, but not too bad. I think we're down. There was some video yesterday to show you how exact Israel is in its bombing. Perhaps most of our folks have seen it. This was the bomb that went into the Iranian television station. And we saw the video.
I saw that.
The lady on the air, and we don't know what she was saying.
She looked like she was ranting.
Oh, she was ranting. Her hands were going, and all of a sudden, things begin to blow up around her.
And she left the studio.
She left the studio. That's how exact they are. And by the way, this story I just put on afn.net, afn.net. If you read down, folks, through the story, let me just read these two brief paragraphs. Meanwhile, Iran has banned government officials and their bodyguards from using all communication devices linked to the networks. The ban announced Tuesday includes mobile phones, smartwatches, and laptops. Iran did not elaborate on the reason for the ban, which was reported by the semi-official Fars news agency. I think I have a pretty good idea why they did that. They remember exploding pagers.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right?
Yeah.
They believe Israel, and probably Israel does, has the capability to track people when they use their cell phones and laptops to communicate.
And to know who's using the phone or the laptop and whether they're worth a missile.
Yes. We know we've been reporting that at least 12 Iranian officials have been taken out by the Israelis in the last 5 days. The vast majority of their military leaders, their intelligence people, and the scientists that are developing the nuclear side of things. There is one military leader who was appointed to take place of one of those who was taken out. He was taken out last night.
Right.
So he had the job
The replacement.
for 4 days.
Yes.
As the replacement.
Well, Wesley, I totally agree with what Fred's saying. Israel, after October 7th, and we're coming up on 2 years, the 2-year anniversary of that. They realize there's no more playing around. They're going to get rid of Hamas. They're going to get rid of Hezbollah, which they have shattered those two. And they are going to, I think they want to get rid of the mullahs in Iran.
While they're at it.
While they're at it. And completely devastate their nuclear plans to get a nuclear weapon. At some point, Wesley, if you're under attack, you have to make the decision that is going to save your life. And it seems like that's what Israel's doing.
Yeah, and if you think about it, if we go back, they made this decision when they had a hostile United States administration against them. They made this decision when Biden was in office, that they didn't care anymore about what other people thought, that they knew what they had. They were going to respond not just according to the measure, but to eliminate the problem.
Yeah.
And that's what you're seeing. And now you have an administration that seemingly, from all that I can tell, is supportive of it. Do we have any of the most recent comments from the White House on what's happened in the last couple of days?
Well, as we mentioned, Trump jetted back to Washington from the G7 meeting in Alberta overnight, got back to Washington at 5 o'clock this morning, Washington time. We do understand there is going to be a very high-level meeting of their officials in these kinds of situations who are in charge. And so we're not sure what's going to come out of that. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of talk, does the U.S. get involved more than it is right now? As Ed was mentioning, we have a lot in the way of Navy resources, both in the Persian Gulf and the eastern part of the Mediterranean. We understand there are, because of those tankers, dozens of them that flew across the Atlantic on Sunday night.
Right.
We're not sure where they're going right now. Probably some of our bases in Iraq, in Saudi Arabia, that kind of thing. So that tells me they are prepared to at least to support perhaps the Israeli Air Force. The big question is the United States going to get involved? In other words, Trump has already warned Iran, if you start attacking our bases, taking out our personnel, it's all over. We're coming at you.
Right.
Well, he says right here in a quote, Trump told ABC News, quote, it's possible we could get involved, and he's citing the risk of U.S. forces in the region, that you just mentioned. So
it's worth mentioning, too, that even if bases are not attacked in some part of the Middle East, a large number of Americans do reside in Israel. Now, numbers are all over the place. You can Google it, and you can find all kinds of things. Basically, I'm going to throw different numbers at you. Anywhere from 80,000 to as much as 600,000 Americans live in Israel. That's a wide range.
Now, some of them, let me ask you just real quickly before you go any further. Are those people who have dual citizenship? Can you have dual citizenship, Israel and somewhere else, like the U.S.?
Yeah, and again, numbers are all over the place. So, I mean, anywhere from 80,000 to as much as 600,000 Americans. These are people that were born in America. Maybe they moved there. Maybe they're working there, whatever it may be. So even if Americans die in Israel based on a rocket attack from Tehran, that is an attack on America in a sense. We'll see whether or not the administration does anything there.
That will depend on how President Trump interprets that. I don't think that that's technically an attack on America because Israel attacked Iran first.
Right.
This is a preemptive strike, which I'm in full agreement with. I mean, they don't care about what I think, but just personally, I'm in complete agreement because apparently from what we've been hearing from intelligence sources that Iran was very close to developing, I think we said on the show yesterday, 9 nuclear weapons, which they have already said they would use to obliterate Israel. Israel has every right to take them at their word. I also think Iran would have handed off some of those to other countries to use against us,
or even rebels.
Yes, and so it was a preemptive attack. Israel initiated the hostilities here. So if Iran and Iran, of course, has a right to defend itself, and if Americans who are in Israel are killed, I personally don't think that is grounds for us getting involved. But again, President Trump's the one who makes that determination. Yeah. However, if Iran attacks either itself or through its proxies, attacks U.S. bases or U.S. ships, then that is a declaration. That's a clear declaration of war against us. And I think that Iran would feel the full brunt of U.S. military might.
Be watching, and we've already heard this, Fordo is the primary uranium enrichment facility in Iran. This is the one that's buried deep, deep down. that's going to take multiple bombings or perhaps one of these bunker buster bombs.
Right.
Which the United States has. These things weigh about 30,000 pounds.
Yeah.
I don't think Israel has an aircraft to carry that weight. And that's why a lot of people are talking about could an aircraft that the United States has be assigned to the Israeli Air Force in order to get that. That is the big one. That is the one the Israelis believe that is where Iran is almost at the point of having the uranium enrichment available to make a bomb. There's talk yesterday, and I think we mentioned this, that there is a belief that the Iranians could have at least 9 nuclear weapons within weeks.
Yeah. Well, this is, listen, the Biden administration should have, in my opinion, should have continued and or strengthened sanctions against Iran because they were determined to have a nuclear weapon, but the Biden administration did not do that. The Obama administration, we talked about this yesterday, pretty well known about the pallets of cash going over there in the dead of night to Iran. This has become a political issue as well because you have Republicans wanting to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. The Democrats don't seem to be on the same page. So Israel has had to decide this is what we're going to do. We're going to protect ourselves. So.
And now, is it not? Hasn't Israel shut down travel in and out of their country for a period? Yeah. So for how long?
The airport, the Ben Gurion Airport, Tel Aviv, is completely shut down.
And this has happened, I mean, recently, like in the last...
Since Thursday.
Yeah.
Since last Thursday. If you go on, FlightAware is a software where you can track air traffic all over the world. It's really interesting right now. When you look at a map of the Middle East, all the planes are going around that area. Like in
it's completely clear.
Yeah, Jordan, their airport is open, but when a plane takes off, it goes deep down in towards Egypt and back up again to the north.
I got you.
So it's you don't want a passenger airplane going through that area right now.
And getting accidentally hit by a surface-to-air missile.
There was a guest on Exploring the Word yesterday. Fred talked to him as well as Bert Harper, Sergei Brazov, and he talked about how air traffic had been shut down since last Thursday, as we just discussed. And he said that, according to what he's heard there in Israel, because that's where Sergei was calling in from, that it was going to be June 23rd at the earliest before you could fly out. And that's under like the rosiest of expectations.
There are some people that are leaving Israel right now. They are being bussed over to Amman in Jordan, and they're getting out that way.
Yeah. Well, it's in war. I've never served in combat. I've never been in the military, but I'm guessing there's enough fog of war that you don't want to be in a war zone, certainly don't want to be flying in and out because accidents do happen. And you don't want to be the one who's tragically, shot down or your bus has been hit by an errant rocket. And so it's not surprising that people are staying out of there if they can at all help it. All right, folks, we are going to take a short break. You are listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. When we come back, Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, he's going to clear up some legal questions we have, and you're not going to want to miss that. Hope you join us.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
There is in the book of Romans a sentence which reads like this: For we know that in all things God works for good with those who love him, those whom he has called according to his purpose. Now, are those just some fancy-sounding words Paul is using? Is this just some good prose? Or are they true? Does God work for good in everything with those who love him? Does God use even the bad things that happen to those who love him when he's working for good? I feel we need a little background on Paul before we can get his statement in proper perspective. You see, he had been a Christian for 22 years. He was making preparations to go to Spain. That was his heart's desire. History would record that he got only as far as a Roman jail cell. Paul had suffered much prior to penning these words. 5 times he had been whipped with 39 lashes from a leather whip tipped with metal. He had been beaten with rods 3 times. He had been stoned once, left for dead. He had been in 3 shipwrecks. He had suffered from heavy toil and hardship and had spent many sleepless nights and who knows how long in jail. After suffering all of this and more, Paul wrote that God works for good in everything with those who love him. At least Paul was speaking with plenty of experience. And you can put this down. Paul believed what he wrote. But back to the original question. Does God work for good in everything with those who love him? Events in the life of Christ add validity to Paul's statement. For we are told that God took mankind's most evil and unjust act, the crucifixion, and worked good through it. After a study of the evidence available, one comes to the conclusion that Christ shared this belief with Paul, that God works for good in everything with those who love him. Does God work for good in everything? May I share with you a personal experience? Back when I started preaching, I served a little rural church. Since the church couldn't pay much, Linda taught school to help pay our bills. We gave very liberally to the little church, probably more than any other family. We thought nothing about it. We did it because we wanted to do it. When Linda had to give up her teaching because of pregnancy, we cut our expenses every way we could. I was in seminary then. And the bills seemed just to keep piling up. In order to help pay our hospital bill, I did something I had never done before or since. I asked the church to raise my salary $20 a month for 4 months. I explained that the money was needed to help meet our hospital expense. There was sufficient money in the church treasury to meet the request without affecting the church finances. But the church denied my request. I can recall that as I heard the decision that night, that it just didn't make sense. We had worked so hard for that little church, given so generously when we could. Now, when we needed just a little help, the church said no. You know, I can remember that I was unable to finish my sermon that night. For the first time in my life, I cried in a church. I could not hold back the tears. I was deeply hurt. But God worked good from that, for I learned how to be a little more loving and kind, a little more understanding and helpful. Because of that deep hurt, I know something of what the other fellow feels when he hurts. And, perhaps, I learned a little of the hurt in the heart of God when we say no to Him. Does God work for good in everything? I believe He does. I believe that even in our disappointments and heartbreaks, God is working for our good.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
Therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Through him we have also obtained access by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we rejoice in hope of the glory of God.
American Family Radio. This is Today's Issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of Today's Issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of Today's Issues.
And welcome back to Today's Issues. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman this week. I'm joined in studio by Fred Jackson, Wesley Wildman, and Chris Woodward. We now want to welcome to the program and welcome to the Today's Issues studio, Matt Staver, who's founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Matt, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, Fred, we have as I mentioned at the top of the hour, just to kind of tease our listeners, when we get a lawyer, an attorney, especially one with the credentials of Matt Staver, we like to maybe learn a thing or two. So what's the first story that we want to pitch to Matt?
Well, if you follow the news at all, it seems every second day there's a federal district judge out there that says President Donald Trump can't do something. On so many different fronts, whether it has to do with deportations or stopping money flowing through groups that he doesn't think should get taxpayers' money, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there was a headline in the Daily Caller just a few days ago that says Senate Majority Leader John Thune has asked Senator Grassley, who chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee, to come up with some legislation to stop these federal district judges from doing what they're doing. And the story says federal district court judges have issued 25 nationwide injunctions halting Trump's policies. Now that compares, I think they said, to 4 nationwide injunctions during the first 100 days of former President Joe Biden's term and 6 during the first 100 days of Trump's first term. So I think, Matt, people have called it the Democrats and their supporters are very good at judge shopping. And these Republican leaders say, is there any way to stop these nationwide injunctions?
Well, I think there is a way to stop it. This is really a problem that we're seeing in the Trump administration with regards to these judges trying to really create national and even international policy, and going far beyond their authority. And so we see these injunctions where they're cherry picking these individual judges, primarily judges that were appointed by Biden or Obama. There's only one, I think, that was appointed by Trump, but it was a different, much more narrow issue, and it wasn't a nationwide injunction. But what we're seeing is they're judge shopping, and these judges are taking individuals who might have even a possibility of a complaint. Many of them really don't have standing at all as individuals. For example, like all these different people that were transported to El Salvador. Who has standing to bring that? It's not those individuals bringing the case. It's different organizations that have an interest, and they don't have standing. So they're allowing these people to come into the courtroom, many of them that don't have standing. They don't have the right to sue in the first place. And then they're granting them not relief that's just limited to their case, even if they are entitled to limited relief, but to the entire nation. And in doing so, they're trying to throttle President Trump's executive authority, and they're overstepping their boundary and authority as a federal judge. So there's several pieces of legislation that are pending. We've been supporting some of these pieces of legislation, and one of them is that these judges cannot give nationwide injunctions, that they can only give relief to the specific person based upon the specific facts in front of the court. If you want to go beyond that, let's take a look at the COVID situation. Liberty Counsel, we litigated a lot of COVID cases. And in the context of the Department of Defense, we sued because of their unconstitutional COVID shot mandate. Well, we got injunctions for individual people that were being forced to take the shot or be pushed out of the military. But in order to represent all of those individuals, we had to move for a class certification. And that's a specific criteria where one person can represent a broader group of people. Otherwise, that injunction is just for this lieutenant, this captain, that major. It doesn't affect everyone else. Mm-hmm. And so there are criterias that you have to abide by to get a class action. And the class action has to be that that particular person that you're representing represents a specific legal issue, and the facts are relevant to all the people. So you don't have to individually prove all these 10,000 different facts. They all have the same thing in common. So it has to be very simple according to the law, very simple according to the facts, and then you can get a class action. But that's not the case. For example, take, say, these people that are in El Salvador. They all have different stories.
Right.
There's not one person that could represent all of those, so you no way could get an injunction that would affect all those people at the same time. You couldn't get a class action, and you certainly should not be able to get a nationwide injunction because that really oversteps the authority of the judge.
I have a question. So a lot of people, they don't understand the law. Maybe they just never pay that much attention to it. Maybe their school system didn't include that in the curriculum. And therefore, a lot of people get their knowledge of the law from what the media tells them the law says. How complicit is the media on stories involving like activist judges? Because CNN's not going to reach out to you for the comment where you might tell us, listen, this judge has no reason to rule this way.
Well, they are very complicit, and I think that's why you need places like AFR to be able to actually set the record straight, and American Family Association with some of the material that comes out in the magazines and other publications. But the standard media has its own bias, number one. And number two, it has limited information even if they don't have bias. So, for example, when the Supreme Court decides not to take a case where you're asking the Supreme Court to take the case, a lot of times this so-called mainstream media or legacy media, whatever you want to call it, they will say the Supreme Court rejected this or ruled on this. Well, no, they didn't. They just decided not to take one of those cases, but there's no actual result from that. There's no decision. There's no majority opinion. But on these particular situations, they tell the public what they want the public to hear, and it's very much anti-Trump. And so they craft their stories to make it look like Trump is just lawless, and these judges are trying to corral him back in under the Constitution, when in fact it's the other way around.
This is Wesley here. I don't have time to look up the numbers here, but about 2-3 weeks ago we were having a similar conversation, and if I remember correctly, it was 2 or 3 times the amount of local or federal judges shutting down Trump's administration and his policies in just a couple of weeks, as opposed to during the whole 4 years of Biden's term. Why is that not obvious in and of itself? Should be to the general public that the court system is against the Trump administration as a whole. At least that's what it looks like to me, just by looking at numbers.
I wouldn't say the court system writ large.
Okay.
I would say that selective judges that are being targeted by those special interest groups, they are filing suit in specific jurisdictions where they know there's a heavy concentration of judges that are appointed by either Biden or Obama, and their likelihood of getting one of those judges because of the ideology that they were selected by those two presidents is very high. And so that's really what you're seeing.
So, okay, in that case, then they're doing the very thing that they're accusing us.
Yeah, say, for example, some of these cases, one of them just got dismissed recently because they filed it in a state that had no connection. The plaintiff and the legal cause had no connection, but they liked the judge, so they filed it in that particular state, and they're really clearly judge shopping. It got dismissed because it has no connection. You'd have to have somebody who actually lives in the state or somebody who's injured in a state so that you could actually sue. You can't just pick and choose anywhere you want to sue in all 50 states. And that's what we see happening. And that's some of the problems that we see. And consequently, we've also seen in the first 6 months of the Trump administration more trips to the United States Supreme Court in 6 months than probably any president's term, whether they've been back-to-back terms.
Yeah.
And it's because he's had to go there time and time again. Most of the time he's gotten relief. A couple of times, it was 5-4 and they didn't give him exactly what he wanted, which was disappointing because I think they should have. But most of the time he's winning those. And I think at the end of the day, what will ultimately happen is he will win a large percentage, in the 90-some percent of these. There may be a few that he loses at the end of the day, but most of them he will win. Unfortunately, what it does is it delays the implementation of his agenda, and that's their purpose.
That's their goal, yeah.
He'll win at the Supreme Court at one point, and he's won a lot of them already, but they want to stop him, and if they can't stop him, they want to delay him.
The voice you're listening to is Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Matt, before we get to our final question, you mentioned that Liberty Counsel was supporting one or more of the pieces of legislation that might rope in these activist judges. Let our listeners know where they can go to follow what you guys are doing and how to keep up with not just this issue, but other things that Liberty Counsel's doing.
Absolutely. We have two different websites, one for Liberty Counsel, which is our legal organization, and that's just lc.org, lc.org. And then our 501c4 public policy organization, Liberty Counsel Action, is lcaction.org, lcaction.org. So lc.org or lcaction.org. And on that particular issue regarding these pieces of legislation, we address that particularly in one of those websites. So those particular bills that are out there would say that judges cannot make an injunction that applies to individuals beyond those that are currently in front of the court. Mm-hmm. So you can't do these nationwide injunctions. And Congress clearly has the authority to do that. In fact, the only court that is mandated is the United States Supreme Court under the Constitution. All the other courts, and how you get into the courts, whether it's by a constitutional question or if there's no constitutional question, diversity because you're in two different states, and the value of your case is in excess of $75,000, all that criteria is set by Congress. Right. So Congress has the authority to set the criteria on these injunctions as well.
Amen. All right. Loudoun County Public Schools in Virginia. They seem to be in the news a lot over the last several years. Well, there's another case, according to a Fox News story this morning. This involves 3 high school boys at a Virginia, at the Loudoun County High School. These 3 boys were in their locker room there at the school, and a biological girl came into the locker room. And they were very uncomfortable with that. But when they would complain to the school district, they were placed under a Title IX investigation for, quote, sexual harassment. We've heard this before. But the story gets really, really interesting. So 3 boys, they're placed under this Title IX investigation. However, one of the boys, the case was dismissed. Now, according to Fox News, in its dismissal letter, the school district said that one of the students was a Muslim. And they said that the Muslim student's alleged conduct, even if proved to be true, would not constitute sexual harassment as defined in its Title IX regulations. 3 boys, initially under investigation. School district finds out one of the boys is a Muslim, the other 2 are Christians. And then they say, well, we're going to drop the case against the Muslim student. I can't see why there wouldn't be a court case over this, Matt.
Well, you have 2 school districts, Loudoun County in Northern Virginia and Montgomery County, Maryland, and they're both just absolutely out of their minds. And they are pushing LGBTQ agenda to an insane level. Like, for example, the Montgomery County School District in Maryland brags that you have 386% increase of gender non-conforming students because they're pushing LGBTQ. And, of course, that's the case from that school district that's up before the U.S. Supreme Court. But Loudoun County's in the same situation. I mean, they're just crazy against people of faith. And that particular situation is obvious that they're discriminating based upon Christian viewpoints because they're exempting this Muslim who had the same complaint based upon his Muslim faith that the Christians had based upon their Christian faith. So how can you drop the charge against the Muslim and continue it against the Christians? They're going to lose this case. But they not only need to lose the case, they need to face damages for something like this because they need to not only get an injunction and a slap, they need to pay for their unconstitutional actions. And I think they will if they don't back down.
But so brazen to say, okay, 3 boys, one Muslim, 2 Christians, but they're comfortable making a decision, or at least they are for the moment comfortable saying, well, the Muslim student, we're not going to do it. Now, the story goes on to say there's a fairly large Muslim population within that school district. It sounds to me like politics going on here.
Yeah, there is definitely a larger population of Muslims in that Northern Virginia area. But I think it certainly is politics, and it's favoritism. And that favoritism is not going to work. And in fact, the U.S. Supreme Court just recently had a case where they ruled 9-0. It's the Catholic Charities case. Mm-hmm. And it was in that particular situation where the state, Wisconsin, or the state, actually the state in that particular case, the taxing authorities said to this Catholic Charities, you're not going to get this tax exemption because you're not proselytizing enough. They're doing social services. And so they weren't proselytizing enough, and they were providing their services to people that are not only Catholics, but other non-Catholics. Mm-hmm. The Supreme Court unanimously said this is not a hard case. You can't discriminate religion among religion. That just came out. And that particular decision was written by Justice Sonia Sotomayor, right. With 9-0 decision. Yeah. Mm. That's the same kind of thing we're dealing with in Loudoun County. They're discriminating religion against religion, and that's clearly unconstitutional.
Yeah. Matt, we're going to let you go. I do have one logistical question, just briefly, flipping back to the previous question. When you remark, and most people who understand the Constitution know that Congress set up the bottom two layers of the federal appellate system beneath the Supreme Court. You mentioned that Congress can change the rules. Is that something that does Congress have to actually put forth a bill that would then have to be signed by a president, or can they just simply change some regulations that govern it without it actually being a bill? How does that work?
They would pass a bill, and then the president would need to sign it.
Okay.
But certainly under this particular scenario, if they got the bill passed, President Donald Trump would sign that bill. So they can limit, for example, bankruptcy. It only goes to a bankruptcy case or court. Tax cases only go to tax courts. You don't put them in other standard courts. So Congress creates specialty courts, maritime courts. They go to maritime courts. The FISA courts, they go to certain FISA courts. So Congress sets up the individual courts, what they have jurisdiction over, and then the criteria for how you can actually bring your case into that court. All that's set up by Congress, and that's part of legislation that they present, and those bills are signed by whatever president's in office at the time.
Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, has been our guest today. If you want to find out more about what Liberty Counsel is doing, lc.org, LC stands for Liberty Counsel, or lcaction.org, that is their more political arm. But both of those websites have all sorts of great resources and keeping you up to date with the legal issues that Christians, but also others, are facing in 2025 and beyond. Matt, I get the websites right?
You got the websites correct, absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for being on with us and helping clarify some of the issues that we're facing, that these laypersons here, we can't answer them like a real attorney.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor to be here with you live here in the studio.
Hey, yes. Glad to have you. Next time you're in town, if you have a moment, we'll make room for you to come.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Matt.
Well, we were able to get through that without my dad here, because he would have taken us off track many times. It was very quick to the point. We got very educated.
Yes, got educated,
and we weren't distracted.
Some of those distractions take us in fruitful directions
at times,
but not always.
Yes.
Not always.
Yes.
All right, Chris, what else you got for us?
Well, let's keep it with the Supreme Court for a moment, because on our website is a story that Fred posted. The headline is Supreme Court agrees to hear appeal from New Jersey faith-based pregnancy center. Yesterday, the justices agreed to consider an appeal from First Choice Women's Resource Centers in New Jersey, which wants to block a 2023 subpoena from the Attorney General there, Matthew Platkin. The Attorney General is seeking information about the Crisis Pregnancy Center's donors, advertisements, and medical personnel. And I do have audio from the attorney at Alliance Defending Freedom, which is representing First Choice Women's Resource Centers. Let's play clip 13.
So the Supreme Court just granted review in this case today. This is a case that's about the New Jersey Attorney General's unlawful targeting and harassment of First Choice, which is a pro-life pregnancy center. He's had a campaign to target pregnancy centers with intrusive subpoenas he's demanded that First Choice turn over 5,000 of the names of its donors, and we've been challenging that in federal court. We've been fighting for the right to be heard in federal court for a year and a half, and the U.S. Supreme Court just granted our request for review on that issue today. So we'll be taking that to the Supreme Court this fall.
I apologize for speaking over the soundbite. They're wanting this heard in federal court because the Attorney General is wanting to do this in state court. But ADF argues, well, that's not really a fair venue because Attorneys General argue all kinds of cases in state courts. That would be like us going into his backyard and trying to win a case here. So they're wanting the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene and rule on this faith-based pregnancy center's behalf.
You know, Fred, this is typical for blue states, and Matt Staver, who was just here with us in studio, the hostility towards Christianity in particular, not just religion in general.
I know.
This is becoming a common page out of the leftist playbook. It only seems to be the hostility towards Christianity that's manifested. But in this particular case, this is pretty common, that where they try to the only reason to get a list of donors is so that leftists can dox the donors, try to get them fired, protests outside their homes. It's an intimidation tactic.
So I was going to say also to intimidate them in some way that would make them say, okay, maybe if I'm not connected with them, then I'll be left alone.
So this is going on all across the country in blue states.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just more of the judicial activism. It's more of the Democrats, the ACLU, whatever the case may be, of they have friends in the court system. And this always, what comes up in my mind is the left always preaches tolerance.
Right.
They always preach tolerance, but they are the most intolerant. They not only want to shut their opposition down, no, it goes beyond, they want to punish them.
Yes.
They want to punish them so that to set an example that other groups will not try to set up a conservative group of, concerns of, in this case, dealing with abortion, whatever the case may be. So it's, people need to take note of that. They're not tolerant. They don't want to just put you out of business. They want to punish you for what you believe.
And that was one of the points I was going to make. So just to elaborate on that, the reason we cover these types of issues primarily as a reminder for us that when we as conservative Christians or those that support the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, that when we go out to basically stand for the grandmother who is at the abortion clinic who's praying outside, when we go to support someone like her and we're accused of proselytizing or infringing on someone's rights by the Democrats, by those on the far left, we've got to remember that they themselves are doing the very thing that they're accusing us of doing. Because so many times for us, when as a Republican, as a conservative, so many times that we concede based on the accusation and we don't want to be accused of anything. But what we're seeing here with the No Kings protests and what they're are about, what they are about is like I said, the very thing that they're accusing us of.
Yeah. Wesley, just to kind of follow up, and there's the music for the break, but these leftists, they don't mind proselytizing young people when the issue is LGBTQ ideology.
Right.
What they don't want is for Christianity to get out there.
Right.
It's only the ideology that they approve of.
And that's certainly a spiritual warfare issue.
Amen. That's right. All right, folks. By the way, our thanks to Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, for dropping in and helping us sift through some issues. But we are going to take a short 5-minute break. Well, it's 5 minutes, whether you think that's short or not. It will be a full 5 minutes for news. When we come back, Steve Paisley Jordahl will be joining us with more of the information and news stories we're covering at this time. Thank you, Chris Woodward.
Thank you.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Hey, if you're looking for family-friendly entertainment or resources to strengthen your walk with God, there's one name you should remember: American Family Studios. We don't just want to bring you shows, movies, and specials that will entertain or build up your family. We're committed to honoring God by making them both biblically sound and of the highest quality possible. Check us out at AmericanFamilyStudios.net.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
Republicans in Congress are investigating reports of former President Joe Biden's cognitive decline while in office. Chad Pergram has more from Capitol Hill.
Republicans doubt President Biden was fit to serve as commander-in-chief. Congressman Ronnie Jackson ran the White House medical unit under 3 presidents. He's long questioned Mr. Biden's fitness.
I've been saying this for, since he was candidate Joe Biden, that he's not physically or cognitively fit to be our president.
Jackson accused former White House Dr. Kevin O'Connor of a, quote, cover-up. The Senate Judiciary Committee holds the first hearing into the former president's fitness Wednesday. Senators asking who ran the country if the president was in fact incapacitated.
President Trump telling reporters he's seeking an end to the ongoing conflict between Iran and Israel. The president left the G7 summit in Canada early to meet with his team about a possible response to the fighting. Republican Nebraska Senator Pete Ricketts says he believes Iran is a very dangerous enemy and stresses Congress should not take any action that impacts the president's efforts in negotiating with them.
We are in a very strong position to negotiate with Iran to get them to give up their nuclear enrichment program and give up trying to get a nuclear weapon. That's what has to happen to get lasting peace here. That's the only alternative for peace. And we can't do anything to undermine the president as he tries to negotiate this.
Some have speculated that Israel cannot succeed against Iran without the help of the U.S., but Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, says Israel can do it alone if necessary.
First, let's look what happened in the last 4 days. Within 4 days, we pushed Iran regime back years back. So we continue now. As we speak, our plans, our Air Force is acting in Iran.
Right now?
Right now, yes. And we have very impressive results on the ground. So we will continue, and you will see more results.
Meanwhile, getting into and out of Israel by air is next to impossible. Sergei Brasov is in Israel and made these comments on AFR's Exploring the Word program.
Israel closed their airports from Friday, from when the whole preemptive strike started in Iran. And then the airport is still closed. I think they're talking about starting some rescue missions of Israelis to bring them back, but there's no conversation about coming out of the country. It's a little dangerous right now. So far till June 23rd.
Randy Weingarten announced she is stepping down from her DNC position.
The teachers union president Randy Weingarten's resignation from the convention comes after she criticized Ken Martin's leadership. She said in part in a letter that she appears to be out of step with the leadership Martin is forging, and she does not want to be the one who keeps questioning, quote, why we are not enlarging our tent and actively trying to engage more of our communities. Tudor Dixon is a former Michigan gubernatorial candidate. She talked about this on Fox.
It's almost like we're watching a breakup every single day now, but I think the more important thing to talk about here is that the Democrat Party is not radical enough for these people. We said that for a long time, especially during 2020 when Randy Weingarten was keeping kids out of school. She had a huge influence over our children's education, and it was for the negative. And yet people were saying, no, she's just a moderate Democrat. She's not a moderate.
Dixon also mentioned David Hogg, the now former co-chair of the DNC.
David Hogg was not a moderate. David Hogg was ousted because he was trying to primary Democrats that he did not think were socialist enough. This party is breaking right now because it's not the moderate old Democrat Party. They are moving towards socialism. And when she says she wants to include other communities, they're not American communities. And that's the problem.
Tudor concluded saying that some Democrats see why they lost in 2024.
And Randy Weingarten doesn't want to hear about it. David Hogg doesn't want to hear about it. And we may just see the party completely break apart.
I'm Bronson Woodruff.
Shoppers pull back on their spending in May.
Retail sales slumped last month, down 0.9%. Excluding autos, the drop is 0.3%. Economists were expecting consumers to pull back in May, reflecting the backdrop of tariffs and economic uncertainty. However, the numbers are weaker than expected. Ginny Coselda, Fox News.
U.S. stocks are nudging lower, and oil prices are rising again. More news available online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
I'll do some stand-up comedy. Abe will do some preaching. Tim will MC the whole thing, and I'm really excited about it. The Weekend with AFA is a chance for our supporters to get better acquainted with the people and ministry you're supporting.
It's a Weekend with AFA, Thursday, October 2nd through Saturday, October 4th in Tupelo, Mississippi. Speakers will include Abraham Hamilton III, Jenna Ellis, Tim Barton, Tim Wildman, and more. Register at afa.net/weekend.
Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome back, everybody. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman this week, joined in studio by Fred Jackson and Wesley Wildman. Chris Woodward has departed the studio to go to continue his other job here, his other part of his job, covering the news. And in steps Steve Paisley Jordahl, or should I say Steve Flamingo Jordahl.
I think
that is. I like that shirt. You've had that before.
Don't confuse people.
Well, it is a black shirt, which I'm always partial to black or blue, and it's got a
flamingos
bunch of
on
flamingos.
LSD.
Yes, with what would you call that color pattern? I'm not sure what that's.
Water oil.
Water oil. Water oil.
Think about oil and water.
Oh, yes, colors. I like that.
Oil.
There's only one explanation for Steve.
Yeah. Oh, I want to hear this.
He's from California.
Yeah, that's true.
California.
That's true. Although
enough said.
See, you guys were talking to Matt Staver. Matt's from Florida, and he and I go back years, decades. Actually, we've been talking and doing work together. And he said it was great to have a flamingos, like I was welcoming him because he's from Florida.
Florida
flamingos.
Okay.
So yeah, I got to tell you. So at the Activate conference, I met a lot of people. We have great listeners, but to a person, they wondered where my Paisley was. So next year, I'm going to have to find some way to put some Paisley on for the
fans. You gotta keep the fans happy.
Keep them happy.
I'll keep our listeners and our donors happy. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Who are fans of yours?
But they want to see the Paisley. You got to give
them the Paisley.
You got to give the people what they want. So, all right,
you guys were talking to Matt last hour, and I don't know if you guys. I didn't hear the whole thing, but I don't think you guys had time to talk about this. His law firm is one of the leading, if not the only, law firm that's taking on a lot of these COVID cases. Churches that were shut down or zoned out, mask things, mandates, illegal firings. He has waded neck deep into the COVID stuff, and he is defending religious and other freedoms, individual freedoms.
As well as seeking, I'm guessing, punitive damages for organizations or companies or governments that acted either illegally or unconstitutionally.
Right. But yeah, if you have a COVID complaint, he's your man.
Liberty Counsel. And we gave out the website for that, lc.org, if you want to contact them for your case. Good point.
Yeah.
All right, Steve, go.
All right, so I have several reports from several sources, none of them major news sources, but I'm reading that all the databases of SEPA Bank, which is one of the largest banks in Iran, were erased in a cyber attack. All the ATMs are non-functional. Customers can't withdraw cash. In fact, there's no indication that the bank even knows who has what cash anymore.
Who would do such a thing?
I don't know.
Well, how do you spell that?
SEPA, SEPAH Bank.
All right, so Fred, explain your point that's made, and I looked over at you, saw you grinning. That you're probably on the right track. Well, what are you thinking?
Well, think exploding pagers. All right, think of that, number one. Think about in the last 4 days the ability to pinpoint where an Iranian general was sleeping at 2:30 in the morning. And it all comes back to Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, which not too many people argue against the fact that they are the best in the world.
Well, and
then we had the story off the top of the show today that the Iranians are telling their people not to use their laptops and their cell phones because the Israelis probably are using them to track where these individuals are.
Well, Steve, you mentioned that these were not large news sources.
No,
That
I would say this is unconfirmed, but reported in several.
What I was going to say is that might have been earlier in the day. I don't see it on Fox, but Times of Israel, Axios, Jerusalem Post, DailyTimes.com. I'm not sure.
India. That's an Indian.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are all mentioning what you're talking about. So it looks like this may be an actual thing, and I'm with Fred. That's the Mossad. That's Israel, or at least Israel adjacent, somebody in support of them. One of these articles also mentioned gas stations being disrupted. So
this is you could argue that this is not a military target. I mean, no one's dying in this kind of thing, but I imagine this is an attempt. This is in my imagination, speculation on my part, for the Mossad to push the Iranian people towards getting a new government.
Right.
If they find that they have no money, their world is in chaos, and they're blaming the mullahs for this because the mullahs started the war, I think that's just fomenting a little bit of anger on the ground there. That's
now, on the other side, I think this is a pretty cool story. But also remember that our enemies have these capabilities too, and we do. I'm sure.
So bury your money.
So bury your money in the backyard or put it in the mattress. No, you should be prepared. Not everyone can do this, but you should be prepared with some cash on hand because in a hot war, for example, between the U.S. and China, or even if China just decides to invade Taiwan, they might, as a precursor to that, a preemptive strike, try to toss the U.S. into some chaos by doing the same thing to banks. So, and again, not everyone can buy 5-gallon buckets full of rice and beans, but those kinds of things you should take some steps to at least get you through a week or two.
I'm just coming over to your
natural
house.
Disasters. No, don't come to my house. I'm going to be at my son's house.
Okay, we're all meeting at Tony's house.
Because he's the prepper dude in the family.
So we were talking yesterday, you remember, about the Mossad and how they snuck agents into Iran and launched drones from within like a mile of these launching sites without Iran knowing a thing. I was talking yesterday with Gary Bauer, and we were kind of amazed at, doing the whole I'm amazed at how good the Mossad is. And then he kind of turned the corner and gave me a little bit of a chill when he said, we have had open borders for the last administration,
right.
Millions of people, many of them, if not most of them, military-age young men.
Right.
Got over the border. We don't know where they are. He says it's without question that there are people prepositioned in our country.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the fact is, some of them, I have no idea about percentages. I'm just going by what our enemies can do without being able to prove how many are on their side. But the Iranians, I'm sure, have what they call sleeper cells in the U.S. The only thing probably keeping them from being sent into action is probably the knowledge that would be considered an act of war against the U.S. But the Biden administration did, for 4 years, untold damage to this country, much of which has not become apparent because of the kinds of people that have been allowed into the country. And I know, Wesley, you don't care about this issue on immigration.
Oh yeah, exactly, on immigration. I was wondering where you were going with that because I knew it was sarcasm. I just didn't know where you were going with it. But if you look at these terrorist groups in the Middle East, they have their hands full right now with Israel. That I don't know if attacking us from a strategy-wise, is a good time for them. So that may be to our advantage, to our favor right now. However, I've heard the same thing that Steve was reporting on, and that's that it doesn't take a genius to realize this sheer number of illegal immigrants or the invasion that took place at the border during Biden administration. Somebody or a lot of somebodies came here with bad intentions,
right?
Beyond just gang members.
Yes, no, that's
beyond. I mean, which is all a problem. I mean, there's so many other problems, but if you think about all the way back to like an attack like 9/11, that type of planning, there's been plenty of time for something like that to be planned, having an open border, which goes back. We got time, I think. Looking at the clock, that there is a lot bigger issue now. There was the national threat to what took place during the Biden administration of the invasion was not emphasized enough,
right?
In my opinion, even amongst the most conservative news outlets, from a national threat standpoint, it was. Our side did do a good job of pointing out the fact that they're breaking the law,
right?
It's causing Americans to lose jobs. The gang members. I think Trump campaigned at a better job of pointing out the gang members and the violent crime that was coming over. But because that was firsthand, we were seeing that firsthand. But now that we're at the point we are now, it's time for us to, as reporters, to emphasize that what are we going to do about the potential terrorist that's coming? And I do remember Ron DeSantis before he dropped out. Now this goes back many years now, but Ron DeSantis, while he was running, he did emphasize that that we are allowing that there could potentially be a terrorist attack, and it would have happened because of
it could be coordinated attacks all across the country.
And his point, what he said that you'll be able to trace it back to the open border. That's what he said.
Absolutely.
So
and it will be to the everlasting shame of the Democratic Party leaders.
That's right.
Who have defended Joe Biden for 4 years.
That's right.
Covered up for him. Alejandro Mayorkas, one of those. But then also who currently are going after Trump for trying to clean out the mess that Biden created.
It'll be to his detriment unless you're reading the New York Times, in which case they'll blame Trump.
Sure. And that will be hard to do, but they'll try for sure.
All right, Steve.
All right. The Trump administration is imposing a travel ban on dozens of more countries. This, according to NPR, and what I'm finding interesting, NPR, of course, as we know, is a very liberal outlet. Not one place in here do they talk about a Muslim ban.
And that's what it is.
Yes. Well, no, it's not.
Well, I mean, it's targeted to countries with radical Muslim population. No?
No, no, not all of them. Some of them. This is targeted. The memo says some of these nations are designated as state sponsors of terror, or some of their citizens have been
Amish terror.
Amish terror.
Come on, that was funny, Steve. Come on.
Some of their citizens are involved with acts of terrorism in the U.S. Some lack credible government authority to produce reliable identity documents. Some are beset with widespread government fraud. So some of these countries, Cambodia, it's not Muslim.
That's true.
Congo, Ethiopia, Egypt, Kyrgyzstan, Liberia, Malawi, Nigeria, Syria, Uganda, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and more.
Okay.
Several of these.
That's a fair point.
In the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So if the Trump
this is on top of what he did last week.
Yeah.
Or earlier.
Yes.
On the travel ban.
Yeah. So if what he's saying is, if you cannot know who you're sending us, if you can't guarantee their identity and something about them, then we don't want them.
Right.
That seems fair and reasonable.
Does it?
Sure does. I'm all for this, and Trump. And you know what? Maybe he's covering up. Some of those countries are very problematic. Congo and Nigeria, and some of these, Zimbabwe. But the Trump administration may be covering the fact that instead of being accused of this being a Muslim ban, he may say, no, all these countries aren't Muslim.
Yeah. You're sticking with the Muslim thing.
I'm trying to rehabilitate my earlier point, but you make a good point. So not all these countries are not. But if they are chaotic You don't want. Listen, we wound up with Haitians coming over here and others that these folks aren't doing anything except getting on welfare and maybe causing some crime. Not all of them, obviously. And you want the old way of having people come to the country was you had to prove you had a job, right?
That's
Fred,
right.
when you came even from Canada,
Yep.
a developed, a non-chaotic country, you had to prove that you weren't going to be a drain on the welfare system.
Yeah, my father-in-law had to sign a letter saying that if I lost my job here, that he would support us. In other words, I could never be a draw on the federal government. Praise God. Everything's been good. But at that time, you had to prove. This is what kind of irks a lot of us who went through the hoops
right.
To come here to the country legally. When Joe Biden said, come one, come all. I mean, 15 to 20 million people?
Yeah.
Some people would call that treason.
Right.
The first job of the president is to protect this country.
Yeah.
He opened the doors. It's interesting. You mentioned Haiti there a moment ago. Not a Muslim country, but what we're seeing in a lot of these countries that have been mentioned, they're gangs.
Yes.
It's opened lawlessness, and we know all about Haiti and what has gone on there. And so you don't want those kinds of people,
right?
Because they will gravitate once they get into a country to a gang.
Yeah,
that's what happens.
Or create a Haitian gang in a major city.
Yes, and then lawlessness, stems from all of that. So he is just being super cautious about this. And yes, the left is going to go ballistic. But look what you're doing to these poor people who want to come into this country.
Yeah.
No. It's about crime. We have enough crime now. We don't need people coming in from countries like Haiti that are just running amok.
That's all that they know.
That's all.
Nobody has a right to come to this country.
Right.
We allow them in. Just like somebody knocks on your door, you may allow them in your house if you know them or trust them, but they can't just come to the door, knock, and say, I demand to be let in, and you have to let them in.
Right, it's a privilege.
Yep. You guys mentioned Nigeria a little bit ago, and there's some tragic news out of Nigeria. Jihadists have massacred about 200 Christians in Nigeria. So these were families. The Fulani jihadists are the terrorists that did this. This town that they went into was housing these Christians that had been displaced before. So the Fulani came for these people before, and they fled to the what they thought was a safe place. But they weren't safe. They started burning down. The police tried to stop them, but they started burning down buildings, and then they began slaughtering people. I'm quoting here from Daily Wire, mostly women, children, and displaced families who thought they had found safety here. So pray for the church. It's a terrible persecution and some martyrs.
Yeah, Wesley, AFA's had at least a hand in trying to. We used to do we still do the Orange Letter campaign?
We have in the past. We partnered with G3, I think it was. I'll have to look that up.
But anyway, we do understand that the Great Commission is important. Now, this weren't necessarily missions groups, but a lot of times here in America, we have no idea of the kind of terror that Christians in places, a number of countries in Africa, but also North Korea, China. These Christians are always putting their lives on the line to keep the faith. This is something that all missions groups understand, and that a lot of AFR listeners also understand. And we need to be praying for Christians in other countries.
Very much so, and I'll try to use an analogy that I understand that every doctor's appointment is scary for the person that's going to the doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
Okay, or it has its variations of worries or concerns. But the hard reality, and I'm glad Steve brings in stories like these for our time on today's issues, because this does give a healthy dose of reality to what other people experience. So while we may think that there are things that we experience here in America that are difficult for our we feel attacked for our Christian faith. For example, the story we've mentioned several times today in Loudoun County, two Christians being targeted because of their faith, which is terrible and awful. But then we also have layers in the states where we just are mistreated personally. But then you have situations, and I'm getting to a point here.
Sure.
Then you have situations like what's happened in Nigeria, where 200 Christians, families, children, in total were killed because of their Christian faith. Now, the reason I use the different examples and paint the big picture is because let this remind us as Christians here in America, this story, that we should be, as Romans 1 says, that we should be bold.
Right.
And we should have courage. We should have courage, and we should be courageous to share and live out our faith with great confidence that we can trust God with the results. Because if other people in other parts of the country, which all we can do is read about this, we can't even empathize or sympathize.
Right.
But we can do the best we can to sympathize and understand that there are Christians that are so committed to their Christianity, and they're so confident that the Bible says what it says about for me to live as Christ and to die as gain.
Yeah.
That they are willing to endure this. Now, and in some cases, you got outright martyred, and then you got murder.
Yeah.
You know, but Christians are being targeted, to your point, all across the world at an even higher level with no First or Second Amendment.
Right.
Yeah, we understand our legal. We got issues about the legal system, and the wheels moving fairly slow at times in different situations in America.
Right.
But in other places, it doesn't move at all.
Yeah.
And so we need to be thankful for where we live, thankful for our First and Second Amendment, and we do not need to be ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ here in America. For the American Christians, we should not be ashamed. We should be bold as we can be.
And if the worst thing that's going to happen to you today is a slow line at the Dunkin' Donuts,
yes,
okay, you have a pretty good life.
That's right.
And we're not making light of as you point out, of the struggles people have with money and all those kinds of health here, but there are places that are even darker.
That's right.
All right, let's end on something way more positive than anything else we've talked about. So, I cover the AI, artificial intelligence beat here at AFN, and half the time, maybe more than half the time, I'm talking about, literally the horror movies, the Terminator movies. When AI
you're bringing in videos with robots, that are talking to you,
right? That take over the world and everything. But here is a use. I want to give you an example of a use of AI that is just fantastic.
And we are going to post this on our Facebook page.
We will post this on our Facebook page. There's a class, like a fourth grade class, about fourth or fifth grade, and the teacher there asked each one of these kids, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" She took their picture, and then she used AI to age the picture and put them in the garb of whatever. If they wanted to be a firefighter, they were in a fire outfit.
Like in their 20s.
In their 20s. Well, this is what you'd look like if you achieve your dream. I want you to hear the excitement that these kids had looking at this. There's no words in here, but you'll just kind of get an idea of what was going on. Cut 12. Every time there was a new, each kid had, one wanted to be a veterinarian, one wanted to be a soccer player. When they saw themselves as a grown-up doing that, they just were floored. The look on their face was just raptured.
Fred, this was really cool. Yeah. Steve showed us this this morning in our story meeting. And to see, listen, what it seemed like to me was that these kids were being given a vision of what they could be if they would just stick with it. In the fourth grade, seeing themselves having completed their educational or career journey.
Great encouragement, and I'm sure it would prompt students to work even harder because someday that can be me. And to be given a visual representation of where they could be in 15, 20 years if they work hard, I thought it was fantastic. You're right.
Well, Brent Creeley will get this up on our Facebook page so that you can take a look at the video. Was this on an Instagram post or X or something?
It was. I had the story right
Well,
up
they
here.
would be able to access the video itself, though.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was through.
All right.
Social media.
Yeah.
All right, folks. More great programming directly ahead. Stay tuned to American Family Radio.
We live in a day when America's families